2nd. We just crossed the threshold of a full moon. So it is officially full moon in July. How do you like that? Over here, messing with the faders. I'm only going to do this one time, you guys. I promise I'll do it once and I will never do it again. But you have to understand that there are glowing buttons in front of me and... Okay, that's it. I'll never do it again. My name is Roo. Thank you for tuning into the Astrocast this week. I hope you're all doing very, very well. I know that this week in Charlotte, it has not been wonderful. We'll put it that way for astronomy and astrophotography in particular, as we have had nothing but rain for approximately the entire week. So a whole lot of rain we've been dealing with, and thunderstorms, and just overall really, really crappy weather. So I don't think I got out a single night since I last talked to you, unfortunately. And that's okay because, you know, in astronomy, that does happen from time to time. So we make the best of what we can. But I will say that this summer is sadly kind of turning out like last summer, and that it's been extremely cloudy for most of the summer for us in the southeastern part of these continental United States. I will say, though, my heart goes out to everybody out west who is battling wildfires right now. I complain when there's clouds, but I have had one time when we had wildfires bad enough here in North Carolina that it ruined the seeing basically for the night. Like to a degree where you could barely see. I mean, you could see stars, but you would not image at all with all the smoke in the air. And something about that is a lot more heartbreaking than clouds, because you know the clear sky is there, and yet man just wildfired away the stars. I guess it's not always man that starts the wildfires, but I'm sure a lot of the time it is. Anyway, again, I'm Roo, and you are tuning into the Astrocast. This week we are doing another YouTube episode, which I'm quite excited about. Took me about, I don't know, an hour to get the studio set up, if you will. I'm in a temporary area right now, which is kind of weird. I'm usually out in my garage. If you're a longtime listener of the show, you know that my regular studio is actually set up in a garage, but it's been insanely hot in North Carolina this summer, and I am not sitting out and sweating my butt off in the garage all summer long. So I am temporarily indoors, but I do have some pretty cool plans with that garage. You know, when you're a kid and you dream about doing cool things with a room, but then you grow up and you have money and you can actually do it. Well, that's what I'm planning on doing with that garage. So anyway, this week I have a pretty cool topic, I think. I was looking over the numbers for which one of my episodes out of all of them performed the best, and it seems to be a category. The ones that do the best are usually when I'm talking about equipment. And that doesn't really surprise me too much, because who doesn't like to hear about new gear or a particular setup, or, you know, this type of telescope versus that type of camera lens. And I started looking back through all the various episodes that I've done on various equipment. And while I kind of did one episode in the vein of what we're going to talk about, I don't feel like we truly gave it the shine that it deserves. And today we are going to talk about just that. And the topic is astrophotography with the most simple setup that you can have. So I'm talking a tripod and a camera, and that's it. A lens too, if you got one. But you might not. And if you don't have a lens, that's okay. You can use a smartphone. But I will predominantly be talking about using a DSLR or mirrorless camera on this episode. It's kind of what we think about as the bare bones setup when it comes to astrophotography. Like when you're very first getting started, like I did years ago. I took my wife's Canon Rebel T5 outside, and it had the kit lens that was 75 to 300 millimeters. And I extended it all the way out to 300 millimeters, and I pointed it at the moon, and I started taking pictures. And I'm sure a lot of people got into astrophotography that exact same way. Some people take pictures of the stars first. Some people take pictures of Orion's nebula first. The first photo I ever took through a telescope was of the Orion Nebula. But that was like a cell phone through an eyepiece photo that I took whenever I first got started. It was before I understood what equatorial mounts were and how they worked and why you wanted one for astrophotography. And at the time, all I knew was, point your lens through the eyepiece and you can take a picture of whatever you're seeing, which was super cool, particularly for planets. I remember getting some really cool photos of Saturn doing just that. In fact, some of the best photos that I've seen of planets over the years have been eyepiece photos. I remember about 6 months ago, I want to say, somebody posted on one of the astrophotography pages that I follow on Facebook, a conjunction photo from, years ago when, what conjunction was it? It was Venus and Saturn, Venus and the Moon. I can't remember off the top of my head, guys. Sorry, it's been a long day, but it was a beautiful conjunction photo. I believe Saturn was involved. It was a really big deal when it happened. It might have been Venus, though. Might have been a conjunction of Saturn. I don't freaking know. Anyway, it was a beautiful photo, and I really appreciated it. And it was just done through an eyepiece. So before we get started, too, I wanted to send a very special thank you to listener Keaton. He actually joined the Discord this week, and he jumped right into the members only Discord chat. I'm sorry, he joined Patreon this week and jumped right into the members only Discord with us. So shout out to you, Keaton. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Greatly appreciate that. We've actually got 6 members now in the Patreon, which is kind of incredible, considering the podcast has only been out since January. I find that to be really awesome. That's almost, one new Patreon member per month that we've been around. And keep in mind, we haven't spent a single dollar on advertising yet. So that's pretty awesome. So if you'd like to support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/the Astrocast. We've got levels at $1 and $5 per month, and you will be able to join us in that members only Discord. And we're actually getting really close to the Star Party number now. And it's not some whittled down one, but the actual one that I had in mind when I started this project. So a few more members and we'll be there, and we will have that virtual Star Party. So what do you need to get started in astrophotography? Well, depending on who you ask, you might need $5,000 and a wife who will not murder you. But I am not of that same mind, although my wife probably would murder me if she knew how much money I've spent over the years on this hobby. I'm actually kidding. I've told her exactly how much I've spent, but it's been over the course of many years. So that's my defense. What's yours? But when I first got started, all I had, again, was a Canon Rebel camera and a kit lens, and that's perfectly fine to get started with. Now, there are things that I wish I would have known when I started with just a Canon Rebel and a kit lens. In fact, I probably could have gotten a much better suited for astrophotography entry-level camera and lens for less money than buying a new Canon Rebel with the built-in kit lenses that is actually astro modified. And an astro modified camera is something that is very, very desirable if you are doing the kind of work that we're talking about, which is, just using a basic DSLR or mirrorless camera to take photos of the stars. And what I didn't know at the time was I had spent about $500 on that Canon set, which basically included the Canon Rebel T5, one battery, a 75 to 300 kit lens, and the smaller kit lens is like I want to say it's like a 24 to 70, probably 24 to 75, somewhere in that range. I think it's 24 to 70 actually. But not great lenses by any stretch of the imagination. Certainly not what you would want to use for astrophotography if you were given a chance or a choice, I should say, because there are, better cameras out there that you can actually get for significantly less money than, the $500 that I spent on that particular beginner's setup. And if you know where to look, you can actually get a whole lot more for your money if you're going in with something like, a $500 budget. So after I started actually doing astrophotography and I was using that very same Canon Rebel when I first got started, and I got my SV Boney 80 ED doublet telescope, which I still own to this day. It's a great, great telescope. The SV 503 80 ED. You do need to buy a reducer. It gets it down to f5.6 and 448 millimeters of focal length. But for the price, it's really hard to beat. And I got to be honest, I love the quality of that telescope. It's been great since day one. But I was using that Canon Rebel T5, and within a few months of using it, I found out about Cloudy Nights, which is a really awesome astronomy website where people, talk about all things astronomy and astrophotography on the forums. But they also have a really, really great section for selling gear as well. So they get, a classified section rather. And I went on there and I started looking because I had read about Astro modified cameras. And I thought to myself, well, man, if I could get all that extra red signal, because that's the first thing you notice if you're taking photos with just a, non-modified Canon Rebel or Nikon or whatever you have, you'll notice that you don't get very many of the reds that other people would get in their photos. And I said to myself, if I had a camera like that, I would be able to gain so much more signal in my photos and they would look so much better. And so I went online and I, went to the classified section of Cloudy Nights and I started looking, and I was kind of shocked to find that for just like $200, you could get a really nice Astro modified camera. So that's what I got. I got a Canon Rebel T3i, the I being very important. Because I'll get into that in a moment, but the T3i, and it was Astro modified by the person that was selling it. So I think this person basically would buy, inexpensive older Canons and then modify them herself and then turn around and resell them on the classifieds, to make a couple of bucks. I initially went to haggle with her a little bit on the price. But then when she responded and she said, sorry, I'm not going to do that because, I barely make any money off of this. I sat back and I kind of thought to myself, I was like, I really probably shouldn't be haggling on this price because it was, like I say, it was $200. It was very reasonable for a good working condition camera that had already been Astro modified. So anyway, I ended up buying the camera. I got it back from her and I started using it along with Nina. So I was bringing out my laptop, I had my telescope, and I had that camera. And the first night that I went out, I got more signal than I'd ever gotten before. Like I had my first usable photos really of something like I remember getting the Rosette Nebula and just being blown away when I finally saw all of that nebulosity coming through. So it really does make a big difference if you can find one that's Astro modified. Now, I'm going to say that with one caveat, and that is if you already own a camera like a Canon Rebel or a Nikon or just any entry-level DSLR or mirrorless camera, really, don't feel like you have to go out and Astro modify it in order to be successful with astrophotography. You can get some really, really awesome shots of the Milky Way, for example, with an unmodified lens. You don't necessarily have to modify it. You can get galaxies. You can get quite a bit. And honestly, for the type of stuff that we're going to be talking about, which is just a tripod and a camera, you're going to probably shooting wider fields of view. That's not to say you can't upgrade later and get a telescope and an equatorial mount and get those really zoomed in views, but you're not going to be doing that type of astrophotography with what we're talking about. This is going to be more wide field. I would say anywhere from like full shots of the Milky Way, including and up to mosaics of the entire Milky Way, if you would like to do that. or something in the range of, one single 16 or 14 millimeter shot capturing, the core of the Milky Way going up above, all the way up to probably around 50 to 70 millimeters, somewhere in that range. At 50 millimeters though, guys, you can get a awesome shot of Rho and the Blue Horsehead Nebula, which is really just, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful areas in all of our night sky. And the whole reason that I'm even talking to you about this is because when I went on my dark sky trip a couple months ago, my favorite shots that I ended up bringing back from that trip were just those with a camera and a tripod. And I'm serious. I mean, I can show you all the photos that I took while I was out there. I got some incredible shots. I got the Iris Nebula. I got the North American Nebula. I got the Blue Horsehead up close, at 448 millimeters. Or not 448 millimeters. What was that with I think I got that one with the 135. Yeah, it was the Rokinon 135 that I had the Blue Horsehead with, but that came out beautiful. And I got the Eagle Nebula at 448, and several other targets. But my absolute favorites were these really wide field shots that I got of Rho, the Milky Way core, and then the huge panorama of the entire Milky Way that I did. Those just were absolutely incredible in my opinion. And again, all I needed was a camera and a tripod. And I actually used my R5 for the majority of those shots, and it's not astromodified. So my regular Canon cameras, or I should say my mirrorless Canon cameras, my R5 and my R7, are not astromodified because I also do lots of other types of photography. And while you can technically get a filter to put in to, I guess you could say, add that spectrum back into your camera if you remove what you need to remove to get an astromodded camera. I didn't want to do that with mine because it's just not very convenient to me. And I do so much other photography that I don't want to be popping in and removing out a filter. And also, honestly, I just didn't want to send my camera away and have somebody else take it apart and all that. It's just far too valuable to me to do that. Although I have heard that there are a lot of people out there that do excellent astromodifications. In fact, I think there's entire companies set up to do nothing but that. So if you know about those, let me know. But I set up the R5 and the R7 on two tripods. So that I had my big video tripod, and then the one that I'm actually recording this video on right now, which is my 3-legged thing, Leo tripod. And I basically pointed them at the targets that I wanted to capture. And I started with a short exposure time. So, I think I had a Rokinon 14 millimeter lens on the R7. And then I had my 24 to 70 f2.8 L lens on the R5. So the Rokinon lens is really the first one I want to talk to you about, though, because if you were to combine that lens with something like a $200 astro-modified Canon camera, you could get just some absolutely incredible results. And I'm pretty sure I bought my Rokinon used on KEH.com, although MPB.com is also an excellent used lens website. But you can get these for 14 millimeter Rokinon f2.8 lenses for Canon cameras can be bought for just $170. I'm looking right now, and they've got models for 173, 168, 158, 230, so it varies a little bit depending on the quality. I think I went for one of their good quality lenses, which is kind of like the mid-range. And honestly, I other than like a tiny little scuff maybe on the focus ring, there was absolutely nothing wrong with this lens. The glass was perfect. They test all of their parts before they sell them. So I had a really good experience shopping on KEH .com. They're not a sponsor of the show either. I just really did purchase my lens from there and wanted to let you guys know about it. They also sell all kinds of other lenses too. So I bring that up because, like we were talking about earlier, if you go to a big box electronics store and buy a startup camera bag for a Canon with 2 lenses or a Nikon with 2 lenses, you might pay anywhere from $500 up to $800 or $1,000 depending on the kind of model of camera that you get for an entry level. But looking at this, if you were to go on cloudy nights and buy an Astro modified Canon for, let's say, $250, I'll go higher than I spent, just to round it out a little bit more, and you added on a Rokinon lens for $200, then look, you're in the $450 range, and you've got a camera that is made to take photos of the Milky Way, nebula, etc. It's going to grow with you. And you've got just an excellent lens with a very fast aperture of f2.8. And I think with that sort of setup, you could go, at least a year before you get bored and decide that you need a longer focal length or a different camera or those sorts of things, because mastering Milky Way astrophotography is just so much different than shooting deep field stuff. And I didn't have a healthy respect for Milky Way photography because I didn't really do it the first few years that I got into astrophotography. And now that I've made a couple of dark sky trips out to really dark places to photograph the Milky Way, I can tell you that it's a different skill set than setting up, your usual equatorial mount and taking shots with your telescope, et cetera. And you run into some different areas where you can have trouble. It's different. So there's different skills that you're going to need to learn, and different little tricks of the trade that you'll figure out while you're out there shooting the Milky Way. But it is a lot of fun, and it is very, very rewarding. So I would encourage anybody who enjoys Milky Way photos and is thinking about getting into astrophotography to strongly consider doing something like that. Now, as far as the tripod goes, you don't have to spend a whole lot on a tripod to get a good one, but you do want to get a good one. You don't want to go to like Best Buy and get one of those cheap plastic sun pack ones that's going to break in half the first time you use it. If you can, get something that's bare minimum made of aluminum. Carbon fiber obviously is wonderful, but it's very expensive, and not everybody wants to spend $300 on a tripod. Believe me, I get that. I wouldn't recommend going with something like an Amazon Basics either, just because I had one of those. I don't think it uses a standard Vixen mount, which is the kind of the gold standard for tripods that you can screw onto the bottom of your camera and then move it between tripods. Because I'm pretty sure it had like it might have been Vixen size, but it was plastic, the one that it came with. And I remember it just broke on mine after a few uses. But looking on Amazon though, for easily under $100, and in some cases, $40-$50, like here's a small rig for $60 that goes up to 68 inches. It looks, honestly, it looks kind of exactly like my Leo, like they were designed around each other, which costs 5-6 times as much as that. So $60 for a tripod on top of the $450 that you paid for the camera, and we're still under $600 here. Now there are a couple of other little things that you could get that could make life a whole lot easier for you. Let me see here. I'm thinking, let me see. Yeah. So sorry, I was looking up remote shutters because they sell so many different kinds of them now. But All right, sorry about that. It's an intervalometer. The word was escaping me, but yes, an intervalometer can be purchased on Amazon or at your local camera store if you want. But honestly, this is one of the few things for astronomy that I can easily recommend just picking up on Amazon because it's so much cheaper. You'll pay like $20 for a good intervalometer. And what that's going to allow you to do is release the shutter on your camera without having to physically touch it. And the reason you don't want to touch the shutter button when you're doing photos of the Milky Way is because it's going to make your camera shake a little bit, and that can lead to star trails, which is not a good look. So if you buy one of those, we're still under $600 in the grand scheme of things. And that's going to allow you to manually program, like say, I want to take 30 photos that are 10 seconds long each of the Milky Way at 14 millimeters. If you have a intervalometer, it's going to allow you to do that. But yeah, anyway, when I'm shooting like this, I like to basically set my camera up. If I'm doing like a really wide shot, like if I were using that Rokinon 14, for example, I would probably just shoot the core of the Milky Way. And you can basically start with a 14 millimeter lens. If you're on a crop sensor camera, I would start around like 10 seconds, and then you can move it to a longer exposure or a shorter exposure. What you'll want to do is zoom way in on your stars after you take that first photo, and just make sure that you don't have any star trails showing up. If your stars look nice and pinpoint, then you can stay on that shutter speed, or you can try increasing it a little bit more. But I'll warn you, don't bring it too high, because what you don't want is for there to be a little bit of star trail introduced on the photo, but it's hard to notice on the back of that tiny camera screen. So, if you feel like you've pushed it to the limit, I would probably back it up one step from that. And have that be your kind of all night shooting range. So, and like I say, once you figure that out for any particular lens that you're using, the longest shutter time that you can do without getting star trails, then, you can use that time forever going forward for like a 14 millimeter shot. But what I wanted to mention was when I was shooting with the 24 to 70 millimeter lens, I was shooting in the 50 millimeter range. And the reason that I didn't use a tracking mount was because my two equatorial mounts were already on other targets with my SV Bony telescope and then my Rokinon 135. Those were both, working on other stuff. And all I had to do was basically line up my target and my camera, and then I picked a star that was right above the lens where I could see it right in the middle above the lens. And then I would go sit down for a few minutes and let it shoot, taking automatic photos one after another. And then every, 5 or 6 minutes, I would stand up, walk over there, and then just nudge the camera a little bit to the right. If you're using a good tripod, they often will let you pan and tilt the head if it comes with a good ball head. And you can just literally pan it a couple degrees to the right and then sit back down, relax, wait a few minutes. And then once you've noticed the star trail over, a little bit more to the west, you can just pan it again. And I did that for probably about, at least an hour on this particular shot that I'm referring to, which is the really great shot of a row that I got with the core on the side. And that's a special memory from that night, because it was the last night that we were there when I was taking that photo, and everything just kind of fell into place just perfectly. And it felt so simple to me, just having a camera and a tripod and just looking at that star myself with my own two eyes, lining it up, and then making those adjustments every few minutes. It's okay if it's not the exact same frame, field of view that is when you move your camera over a little bit, as long as you're keeping it, within a reasonable range of where you're going. Because ultimately, if you're using a pretty wide field of view, like 50 millimeters or wider, as long as you're, nudging it no more than a couple degrees at a time, you should be able to keep that main target, dead center of where you want it to be, fairly easily. When I ended up stacking all those photos, and I probably moved the camera 10 times during that process, I had very, very little artifacts that I had to clip out along the edges to crop in. So yeah, it's something that's really fun to do, super easy to keep up with. And like I say, just with a basic Astro modified camera, a, $200 lens, you can get some incredible shots. And from there you can upgrade. You can get even wider lenses. Like I know I've mentioned the TT Artisans lenses a few times on the show. If you just want to get incredibly beautiful shots of the stars, and I'm not talking about necessarily the Milky Way or nebulas or galaxies, although some of those will certainly show up in your photos, but one of my favorite things to do is to use my TT Artisans 11 millimeter fisheye lens. And just like, for example, when it's wintertime and the winter circle is out, the auditorium with Orion and Taurus, and I picture like a giant scene happening before my eyes anytime it's wintertime in the northern hemisphere. And you've got, Orion and Taurus and the twins and Gemini and everybody standing around this awesome scene unfolding. When you take a lens like that 11 millimeter fisheye, and you point it up at the sky, you can get all of that in one shot. And if you get the right shutter length, and, if you get the ISO right, et cetera, you can get those stars to look so good on a lens that only costs like $100. And that always blows me away. Like I say, not necessarily do I try to get like, long exposures and, galaxies popping out at you and everything else. But just to be able to get a really pretty picture of the stars is something that I really think is underappreciated, and people should do more often. And that's something that you can do with a TT Artisans 11 millimeter fisheye lens and a $200 camera. I still use mine all the time. They're in my bag over there right now, and those lenses are just incredible. So wanted to recommend that to you guys if you want to give it a try. Couple other things in the news. I know the new AM5 mount is out. I've watched a few reviews on it. It looks really cool. It looks like they've made a few tweaks here and there to how it works. I am not an owner of the original AM5, so I can't really speak to it. I have almost pulled the trigger so many times on an AM5, but I just can't bring myself to do it yet because my Ioptron CEM26 mount is just such a good mount, and it's been so good to me. And honestly, I think the reason I haven't gotten an AM5 is because when I do buy my next mount, I think I'm going to want something that's got a bigger payload capacity, because whatever I buy next is going to live in my observatory that I'm building. And I am going to want, I think, more flexibility than 44 pounds. And I say that not because I think I will use a 44-pound setup, but because, in reality, you probably shouldn't push it more than 30 pounds. And that I could see happening with some of the setups that I've been looking at. I really like the EQ8R Pro. I've seen the one that has codecs built into it as well, and that has a beastly capacity. So that's one that I am certainly considering as well. As far as awesome things are considered, I have one thing that I would like to mention to you. My wife actually surprised me with a really cool gift this week. She purchased for me the Milky Way Lego set. I'm actually looking at it right now. It is in this massive box that she handed to me one night last week. I wasn't expecting it at all, but she was like, "How did you not know about this? How did you not buy it?" Because she knows I'm such a Lego space junkie. But it's over 3,000 pieces. So it's, very, very big Lego set. I think this is going to end up being my largest set. I don't think I have anything that's over 3,000 pieces yet. Though I'll have to look at the records on that one, because I know that the Apollo is about, it's like 1970 or 1960. What year did we go to the moon? Let me see. I think it was 69, right? Yeah, 1969. And that's actually how many pieces are on the Apollo rocket Lego ship. If you did not know that, they did that on purpose. It was a cool little shout out to the year we went to the moon. But yeah, the Milky Way, really super cool. Very affordable by Lego standards too. $200 for a 3,000 plus piece set. Though I will say this is one of the art frame sets. So it's essentially meant to be basically a framed photo that hangs on your wall, but the photo is almost like pixel art. It's comprised of Legos. And what I really love about it is there's just a couple little things within it. Like there is a little "you are here" symbol on one of the spiral arms of the Milky Way. So that's obviously where our solar system is located. And then you can also see a little satellite almost making its way out. And I get the feeling that that's Voyager, though I haven't opened the box yet, so I'm not 100% certain. I'm going to have to look into that and see. But if you guys are fans of Lego like I am, definitely check out that Milky Way set. And another big thank you to my beautiful wife for surprising me with such an awesome gift. I also have a little bit of an announcement, I guess we could say. I am going to be changing the schedule of the show just a little bit. I think instead of Tuesday nights, we are going to start releasing new episodes on Wednesday nights. And the reason for that is that I usually record on Sunday or Monday. I do it on Sunday when we don't have too much to do around the house, but oftentimes we do have too much to do around the house. And when that happens, I end up recording on Monday night. And if I end up recording on Monday night, I really don't have much time to edit. And being that I want to start doing more video versions or episodes of the podcast, it would be really good to have like a scheduled day on the calendar for me to edit. And that's going to become Tuesday ultimately. So I can't record or edit or anything during working hours because I'm far too busy to be doing that. So my only, choice is to do it in the evenings afterwards. So that is what I will be doing. So obviously this week we're on our normal schedule, but next week's Astrocast will start coming out on Wednesday evening. So just keep that in mind. If you're one of the folks that I truly love for showing up right at release time every week, and I know that there's about 60 of you out there, just remember to set your calendars to Wednesday night for next week, and I will look forward to talking to all of you then. And I guess that's pretty much going to do it for this week. I'm going to keep this episode just a little bit shorter than normal. We'll be back next week with a long, full-length, hour-long episode. But I've just got a whole lot of stuff left to do around the house, and I still have to edit this video, yada, yada, yada. So just a little bit of a fun episode this week. I definitely wanted to sit down and talk with you guys, though. I didn't want to miss another week because we did miss an episode a couple weeks ago because I had so much stuff going on, and I definitely tried to avoid that at all costs. But I thought it'd be fun to talk about just, camera lens, camera, and tripod this week. So that's what we have discussed. And perhaps if you have a friend or family member who has considered getting into astrophotography but isn't really sure if they want to, this would be an excellent episode to share with them. So that way they can get an idea for the sorts of things that they can start capturing with just a very simple setup like that. We have actually also talked about how to go about taking long form exposures. So I actually talked about that back on the Let's Shoot the Milky Way episode. So if you're curious about, how exactly to take photos once you have that basic gear, I go through the entire process on that episode. So I will link to that in the show notes. All right. And for recommendations this week, I've got a fun one for you guys. This is an audiobook that I'm going to recommend. It's certainly available in paperback or hardback if you prefer. But I would highly recommend the audiobook just because the book itself is read by the author, and the author is none other than Mr. Seth Rogen. So he's a very, very funny comedian actor from Canada. and he has a book called Yearbook, and I highly recommend checking it out. It's basically a collection of stories that he has put together from his life growing up and getting into the industry, and what it was like to record all of the movies that he did and all the friends that he made along the way, and a lot of the guys that he grew up with and ended up coming along with him for the ride. It's a really awesome story. It's not too long. I want to say it's like a 9 or 10 hour listen on Audible, which is pretty short for books. And it is hilarious. So if you want to have a good laugh, definitely check out Yearbook by Seth Rogen. And I think that is going to just about do it for us this week, my friends. I greatly appreciate you tuning in to the Astrocast. My name is Roo. You can reach me at rooastrocast@gmail.com if you have any questions, if you want to make a suggestion, or better yet, if you want to send a photo for me to share with everyone in the background while this episode plays. So thank you so much for tuning in this week. I've been your host, Roo. You've been listening to the Astrocast. Clear skies.